Hi, I'm Jen Kelly, founder and CEO of New Initiatives Marketing.
And hi, I'm Nicole Crozier, a fractional CMO with New Initiatives Marketing. And today we're answering another question from our Ask a Fractional CMO newsletter. And that question is, why do I need a company newsletter? So Jen, why do B2B companies need their own company newsletter?
It's a good question. It's come up actually over the last several weeks. Just to set the stage here, when we say newsletter, we mean newsletter going out to strangers, a newsletter going out to the public, as opposed to an internal company newsletter. So this is not internal communications.
Good point.
This is newsletter out. And you know what is funny, because I was talking with someone who was talking about how they used to do internal communication newsletters, and I was like, oh right, there's different series of newsletters.
Very
So
true.
100% this is out to the public. This is out to either people that are already customers that are on your list. These are people that have signed up for your list. They may come to your website and sign up for your newsletter. These may be people that you've had first, second, third conversations with about buying your product or service. They are not ready to buy. They're not in the right buying cycle, and they are on your newsletter to keep in touch with what's happening with your company. So why do you need a newsletter? So if you couldn't tell already, Nicole and I are super bullish on company newsletters. We think it is a fantastic piece of marketing collateral for many, many different reasons, and we'll get into that in this conversation here. But number one, it's a way for potential clients and customers to keep in touch with you. And what's important about that is, imagine someone coming to your website for the first time, or imagine people finding out about your company on social media or through a talk you've done, a podcast you've done, you're on a stage at a trade show, and they want to find out a little bit more information about you. They go to your website, they may download some of your resources. They're not ready to buy yet. Unfortunately, not everybody that is interacting with you is ready to buy day one. And having them on a newsletter or allowing them to sign up to something such as a newsletter helps them be able to keep in touch and learn more about your company and not forget about you. So that's
right.
I guess, number one.
Yeah, that's a good point about not forget about you. So the number one thing I think a company newsletter does is it keeps you top of mind. Someone could have come to your website and downloaded a piece of material, a PDF, ebook, or something like that, and they may have forgotten about it. They may have loved the ebook at the time, and then they've drifted off and they're on to another topic or subject, or their heads down at work, and then ping into their inbox comes the company newsletter, and they're just reminded. They're like, oh, right, I was thinking about this, that, and the other thing from the PDF.
Yeah, no, that's so important. The second thing, we've got a huge list here, but another thing that's really important about the newsletter is, as opposed to, I guess, your audience out on social media, with the newsletter, you own that list. And by owning it, we mean that once those people sign up, you're welcome within reason to communicate to and as often as you can with those people. They have given you permission. They've given your company permission to communicate with them. That is yours. Think about if you have, say, a big list of followers on any of the social media platforms, any change, and we've lived through this, right? Any change that the platform makes is going to affect how you get in front of your audience.
Right.
So while social media is fine and great, and it's not a comparison to being or having a company newsletter, but we would say just don't rely on it, because that audience or your account gets hacked. Boom, that audience could be gone. So the important thing is these are customers' names. These are interested parties that you have control when you talk to them.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because that's so true. You own your email list. You do not own your property on social media, and anything can happen. I've known a number of people who have been suspended or have lost their accounts on a number of the social media sites, and they have no idea why. And they were using that as their primary method of communication. And so when that went down, it was a huge gap in the business. And so this fills in is like any communication gaps. So if you're regularly communicating through your email list, you have control of that. You can keep that going. And so it gives you some continuity in case other things don't work out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And when you talk about continuity, there's also something in there about timing as well.
Mhm.
So while the social channels work obviously 24/7, you are not on there 24/7, right? So
Mhm.
and neither is your potential customer, your ideal client. And so your the idea that they're going to see your posts come by at the time that you want them to is, you know, could happen, could not happen. Yes,
Right.
you have to have an aggressive posting schedule or content schedule to do that. But contrast that with virtually everybody's making sure that they know what's going on with their inbox, right? So
Right.
it's more of a, I was gonna say an intimate way, but not so much. It's more of a way of making sure that you really are getting in front of the people that want to hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
With that, there was another question that came up in the last couple of weeks, and I hadn't thought about it this way before, but I want to talk about it because I think sometimes us in marketing, or maybe I can speak for myself, we get, you know, in our little bubble, and it was such an obvious question, and I thought it was so good. So here's the question. So the pushback was, we don't really have news about our company every week or every month. Why would we have a newsletter? And I just thought, oh,
Mm.
that's so literal about the newsletter, right? But I'm like, that's
Right.
such a good question. So the answer to that, or the I gotta say the pushback on that is, you know, you actually do. And
Mm.
it goes into the same conversation about, we all get tired of our own company's marketing before the potential client even thinks we're out there marketing, right?
That's right.
It's just that we're so close to it. That's why we think, oh, there's no news we're sharing
Mhm.
around here, right? So you don't have to be launching a new product or, you know, going into a new region in order to call that newsworthy.
Mhm.
Newsworthy really can be educating the list about different things about your market, about different things about your product, about different things
Mhm.
that are happening in the industry that you serve. And it very well could be talking about information that you've already published online, and just either explaining that point in a different way or
Mhm.
delivering that point to this audience that may not have heard of it before.
Right, and there's many different ways to focus your newsletter. So if you think about your sales calls or any calls with your customers, any questions that they ask you could be news that you could put out on your newsletter. Because like Jen said, it may not be news to you, but it is going to be news to your prospects. And they do need to hear it over and over. So you don't have to worry about saturating them with messages or worrying about them already having heard something. In fact, you could answer a question in a number of different ways, a number of different times on your newsletter to make sure that it falls for someone, it lands for someone, because they could have heard it in one way before. And it's like, they're like, oh, and then they hear it in this other slightly different way or a new context. And it's like, oh, I get it. Right. I can see how that applies to me.
Yeah, I get it now. We've all been there, right? Like, oh, I've
Yes.
heard that before. Finally, it
Right.
finally it lands. Uh, Another topic in there where it's not newsworthy, I got some questions around. Well, so we've been to certain trade shows, or we're going to certain seminars. Why would that be considered news? Your existing clients and your potential clients, I'm going to bet that they want to know that they're dealing with some of the A players in the industry. They want
Mm-hmm.
to know that you are taking care of your industry knowledge and your standing within the industry, and understanding what is happening that's different in the industry and how you're going to react and keep up with any of the changes. So you don't have to be keynoting a presentation. You can be attending certain trade shows and sort of kind of report back on what you've learned, or what some of the new highlights were from that
Mm-hmm.
industry conference or industry trade show. And that can be considered news as well, because you have to think, some of these people on your list are reading to get the help that they need,
Mm-hmm.
that your company provides.
Absolutely. And also keep in mind that your newsletter is for both your prospects and your customers. And some companies think, "Oh, well, I don't want to send out customer information to my prospects." But I would challenge you to say, "Oh, actually, that's going to benefit my prospects as well." Because they want to hear about what you're educating your customers on. And so you can include as part of your newsletter customer education. And that will also show your prospects the type of value that you give to your customers and how much you care and spend time and effort on educating them.
That's a good point. That's a good
Mhm.
point. When it comes to frequency of newsletters, we've all probably either been on the newsletter list for good or for bad
Mhm.
of companies that mail weekly, every 2 weeks, once a month, once a quarter. Do you have any opinion on what the frequency is when a company is starting with their getting started with a company newsletter? Do you have any advice on what the frequency should be?
Yeah, I like a once a week frequency. And the reason for that is I feel that it kind of pushes you to think about what you want to talk to your prospects and customers about every week. It gets something out there to them every single week so you're staying top of mind. And if you're worried, oh, what am I going to put in a newsletter every single week? You can create a calendar. You can think about a topic for that month, for things that are related to that topic. Boom, there's all the content for your newsletter. And like we were saying before, you can include tidbits from events that you attend, information about your products, how to use something, how something works, what your customers are doing, how your customers are using your products or services, what's possible for them now that wasn't possible for them before. It's endless. And so you can map out like 12 months of content for your newsletter that kind of covers everything that you think prospects and customers might need to know, or covers the top questions that they might be asking you.
Yeah, that's a good point. And
Mhm.
you said before, just go on over to your salesperson's desk and ask them what are the major questions that
Mhm.
they're fielding, and there's some content for you right
Mhm.
there, right? Answering those questions. So
Absolutely.
that's a really interesting point. What is your point of view, Nicole, on highlighting either employees or contributors to your company, to the product or service? What's your thought about highlighting those types of people in the company newsletter? Are you for it, against it? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely for it. Anything that you can do to put a person in front of your customers and prospects is amazing. Because when you put an individual there, it creates a connection, it's more personal, and it moves people through that sales cycle of know, like, and trust. They put a face to the name, and it just increases that trust level exponentially.
That's
It also
yeah.
show
Go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Sorry.
Because it also showcases your expertise. So your individual people, they all have their unique expertise that they bring to the table. And you can also showcase, in addition to your employees, your partners and any other types of people that you're connected with.
I think that's a neat point, because also too, while you may know all the different steps are involved in
Mhm.
getting your product or your service out the door, admittedly, and why would they? Your client probably doesn't. So to
Right.
show, all the different stages and all the different
Mhm.
expertise that goes into delivering that product or service, it really puts a face to a name, and it can really help them understand what's involved in the product or the service that they're
Mhm.
so.
100%.
That's a neat point of view on there. What is your if someone is going to get started and they get intimidated by having a large list? What is the ultimate list to get started? Is there any kind of number that you absolutely can't have a company newsletter until you have X amount of people on your list?
No, I think you can start as soon as possible.
Mhm.
Getting into that cadence, trying to start growing your newsletter list is a good idea as well. So
Yeah.
if you even have just a very small list, you're just starting out, that's great. It gets you into a rhythm and a flow, and you never know. Some of those prospects may be converted by your newsletter. But at the same time, of course, you'll want to do other things to grow that list over time.
Yeah, of course,
Mhm.
of course. And I think too, even if you're starting with a small list, and small is relative to other people. I was sharing with Nicole before we started recording that I had heard on a podcast that someone had started their business and mailed their small list, and they actually had 9 people on their list, got a sale, and that's how they
Mhm.
got started with things. So,
Nice.
it can be that small. But
Right.
the other pushback I had was, we know everybody that would be on our list. Don't we have to wait in order that we have, you know, some strangers on our newsletter list before we start talking to them, because everybody that we know already knows what we're doing. To that, I have to say, while everybody maybe on your list that already knows what you're doing, they don't know as much as you do about your product or service. And don't let that be a reason to stop, because also too, you never know who they know or what other deals they're involved with where your product or service could help, and they can easily forward on a newsletter. So
100%.
yeah.
Yeah.
Any
So
hesitation around that, or a small list or
yeah, so to the point of having people on your list who already know you, those are the perfect people to be mailing to, because you're going to keep your company top of mind with them, and those people are going to be some of your best repeat buyers and referrers. So keep in mind that if these people know you, they like you and trust you, they will refer you to other people. And so keeping top of mind with them is a great idea. And also, if you want to sell deeper into a company, you want to get some repeat business. Perhaps you have extra services that you're adding on, or there's going to be more features to your product. You want to let those people know about that. And if they're prospects that already know you and you're thinking, you know what, they're never going to buy, you might want to think again, because if they're educated over time, the more they hear from you, the more they will just automatically start to think that you are the expert trusted authority. And so one day there may be a trigger that happens for that company, and they will need your product or service, and they'll be ready to take that action.
Very good. Yeah,
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense for sure. What is your thinking on if people say, what are we going to put into our newsletter? How are we going to format it? One of the things that I say to folks is, like, your formatting can change over time. And what I mean by that is we've all seen a couple of different styles of newsletter. There is sort of the long form content that comes in. If you imagine, say, a full length blog in the newsletter, and that's the point of view from one company. That's how they like to do their newsletters. Others come in very visual, little bit of bullet point here and there. You know, they make it
Right.
easily consumable, and you know, if you want more, you can dig in. What
Mhm.
are your thoughts around, like, sticking to a format, or a format to start to start when someone is getting their company newsletter up and running? Doesn't matter. Can it evolve over time? What are your thoughts on the format?
Yeah, so I think there are any number of formats that can work for you. I think you can absolutely start simple if you want to and evolve over time. So, for example, don't hesitate to start sending out your newsletter if you're worried that you don't have this amazingly graphic designed template. You can start out with text only, and in fact, a lot of newsletters are text only these days. I would also take into account your audience. So, who are your prospects and ideal customers? What are their personas? What are their personality styles? How do they like to receive information? So, for example, if you own a graphic design company and you're marketing to other creatives, well, maybe then you do want to have a little bit more of a creative template. But say you're an engineering company or a scientific firm, well, maybe your people are more analytic and they would just appreciate, like, let's just get straight to the point. I don't need all these flowery graphics. And so you can go in a number of different ways.
One of the things, when we were first starting to talk about this topic, you said, you know what, newsletters are really good for referrals. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit more about what you mean by that, and why are newsletters so good for referrals? Like, isn't word of mouth okay? Like, can you explain that?
Right. So when it comes to using your newsletter as a source for referrals, the main way this works is that it keeps you top of mind with your customers. So your customers may not be using your product or service every day. You may not be top of mind, but this is going to keep you top of mind. So when they think about someone or they come across someone who potentially could benefit from your product or service, they'll be like, oh, you should talk to so and so company. And it also works with prospects or people who just follow you, but they're not at that trigger point yet where they need your product or service. And so they could be receiving your newsletter, they're talking to someone who needs this product or service right away, and they could refer you. So it just keeps you top of mind. It keeps you in kind of the target zone.
Yeah, it keeps you in the target zone. And also too, it's that warm introduction to the email inbox, as
Mhm.
opposed to being out, say, on social media. And can you talk a little bit about your opinion on the open rates and the unsubscribes? And what we mean by that is, if you haven't had a newsletter yet in your company, once you get into having one, what you'll be wanting to look at is the reporting that happens after a newsletter goes out. And that can show you who opened your newsletter, how many times they opened it, what did they click on, that kind of thing. A lot of people obsess over the opens. A lot of people obsess over, oh, we don't get enough click-throughs, this and that. But personally, I think something to look at is your unsubscribe rate as well. I mean, how is the unsubscribe rate? If no one's unsubscribed, we have one client. I'm going to knock on wood, so we keep the spell going. But it's been over 2.5 years, and I don't think I've seen an unsubscribe yet. And they have every month there's at least 50 to 75 new subscribers onto it. And so that, it really is outstanding. I mean, what can you surmise from that? That the information there is what is expected or very much welcomed into the inbox. What are your thoughts on some of the analytics around email newsletters?
Yeah, it's interesting about the unsubscribes. And this is one of the things that I think prevents a lot of companies from sending out a newsletter. They're worried about over sending to their customers or their prospects, that they're going to be bothering people. People aren't going to want to see their newsletters. But what we found with B2B companies is that the opposite is true. And in fact, we see very low unsubscribe rates. Most people are wanting to see your news. If they have chosen to subscribe to your newsletter or haven't unsubscribed, it means that they are welcoming your email into their inbox. They have control over how little or much they view it. It may be enough that they just see your headline and they're like, oh, hey, that's interesting. It's like, so your subject line can almost be like scrolling through the news on an online newspaper. And so sometimes your subject line could just be enough to intrigue them or keep you top of mind. Then they might click through and open your newsletter. And so then they've engaged in even further. But don't worry if they haven't opened it. I find that a lot of people still like to see this coming into their inbox, and they feel like they're informed sometimes just by your headline. Your headline could be, oh, hey, we're attending this and this show. And they'll be like, oh, great. I'm looking forward to seeing them there. When it comes to unsubscribes, if you have a higher unsubscribe rate and you are a B2B company, that's something to look into. So I would look into, who are you getting on your list? So it might not be that there's anything wrong with your content. It could be that you're not reaching the right people. So how are you getting people onto your list? Is it through free offers? Are those free offers really directly relevant to your target audience and to who you want to get on the list? If they are, and you feel like your list is full of all of those people, then you can look at the content. What type of content are you sending that could cause people to unsubscribe? But you know what? Everyone gets a few unsubscribes. If it's minimal, it's here and there, I would absolutely not worry about it.
Yeah. Just a data point, not necessarily a trend there, for sure. Absolutely. With this, I'd like to wrap up our conversation with a couple of points from you, and your thoughts on. We started this conversation about how can my company benefit from an email newsletter? Could you leave us with a couple of wrap-up points about if we've got some companies listening and they think, okay, all right, let's get this thing started. What are a couple of things that they should do immediately in order to get their email newsletter going?
Well, one thing we didn't mention is, if you're a company who's already producing content, so say you're writing blog posts or you're putting out content in another way, if you're not using a company newsletter, you're missing out on a huge opportunity to share that ongoing content with your prospects and your customers who are engaged and interested. So I just wanted to point that out first of all. And then your question to, how do they get started? It's easy to get started. There's any number of email systems that you can get set up on right away. It could be something like MailChimp or similar. You can start for free. You can start engaging with a small list, and you can start with a text-only newsletter if you'd like to.
Absolutely. Just get started. That's the thing.
Just get started.
for
Exactly.
yeah, economically and ownership wise and sort of a long-term piece of collateral. I think newsletters just really knock it out of the park on all different levels for all different kinds of companies, whether you're selling the smallest piece of hardware or the largest yacht. I mean, it really does help all kinds of companies for sure. So with that, thank you very much for all of your insight on these newsletters, Nicole. I really appreciate it. And if any of you have any questions about getting started with your email newsletter, contact us. We have years of experience of getting this up and running and making it successful for your business. So thanks for tuning
Fantastic.
in, and we'll talk to you
Thanks,
soon.
Jen.